That's LA City Hall, a place where there's lots of conversations about potentially reforming the city charter, also what's happening with the budget, also what's happening with the auditing and accounting. In fact, Thursday at LA City Hall, members of the Charter Reform Commission held a public hearing on whether to adjust some of these propositions and considers a series of police reform-related amendments. The commission's recommendations will eventually head to the City Council, which will decide whether they will end up on the November ballot for voters to then approve. It sounds kind of wonky and technical, but it is about the way LA City operates. And a recent report from the city's financial watchdog found rising liability payouts and falling revenues, which have put the city on an uncertain financial path, which will take some, quote, bold reforms to address, according to the report. The findings are part of the fiscal year 25 annual comprehensive financial report released by City Controller Kenneth Mejia. And Kenneth Mejia joins me right now in studio. Welcome back to the show, Kenneth. Great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
This report feels, and so often when we talk about things with the LA budget, it feels somewhat dire. Talk about the news that you broke here.
Sure. So we just released our annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year 2025. And like you said, we unfortunately came up short in revenue, $160 million short. We also had overspending. The biggest area was liability payouts. The budget was $87 million. The city ended up paying $287 million. The largest share was police-related liabilities at $152 million. But just those were some of the things that we see is revenue not coming in as strong as we want, and also just a lot of spending and liabilities happening.
Yeah, a lot of spending and a lot of overspending. And this is looking at the 24-25 fiscal year. We're looking at now what we can do about this moving forward as well. What do you see happening with this overspending? I mean, when the city overspends, it comes out of the general and reserve fund to some degree?
Sure. And over the last 2 fiscal years, because right now we are potentially hitting the 3rd fiscal year in a row of a budget deficit. And so what the city did and does is they would tap the reserve fund, which is like your emergency rainy day fund that you save when you have emergencies, or you'll see some austerity measures that affect the people, right? You'll see departments get their hiring frozen. You'll see furloughs, unpaid days. You'll see the potentials of layoffs. And so what you'll notice as an Angelino, like, oh, there are not that many services, or they're not at the level it should be, or that's on hold because we need to save that money from this extra spending to cover this overspending, or cover that revenue shortfall, which is what you're seeing.
Yeah, and there's a requirement for that reserve fund to be at like 5%.
5% of the general fund, correct.
We haven't been, we've been at 4%.
Right? We're there, we're close, we're there right now. And so, but it's it's always tempting because of these shortfalls, or because of the overspending, that there's a risk that we might tap it again.
Right, and then risks to the credit rating, and that creates all kinds of issues for the city in lots of ways too.
Correct, and in our ACFR report, we said 4 credit rating agencies gave us a negative outlook.
Right, and that is not ideal, obviously. And part of this, as you mentioned, is the revenues that haven't been quite what they expected, declining. Which revenue sources are we talking about that we saw some hits to?
Sure, and so, when it came to the revenues, the city tends to budget higher, right, in certain aspects. So it could be a lot of your economic sensitive taxes, so things like your sales, or things like your transient occupancy tax, like your hotel tax, areas like that where those are driven by the economy. And, for us in the past, my office has given more conservative estimates because it's better to be conservative and beat your estimates.
That's a good budget.
Actually, exactly. So, but actually for this fiscal year 2026, our projections for, as we head into the year end is that we're either going to be at budget or a little bit below, which is better than, being short 160 million, or 2 years ago we were short 220 million, right? But currently the city is on target to overspend over budget by over 200 million. So even if we're on budget with the revenues, the overspending still has that gap.
Well, a couple of the things you identified in your report were the port traffic being down 12%, which there was a lot of tariff uncertainty, which contributed to that. There was the entertainment industry, which we've seen and we've been talking about a lot with Hollywood production leaving. Also the fires to some degree having some impacts. How much of that is right-sizing, is rectifying when you look at what's happening now with the revenue and what our forecast is?
Yeah, I would say, you know, the Palisades fire was a big area that took a hit and also gave a lot of our credit agencies a lot of, you know, worry, right? And we're still in the beginning processes, right? We don't know what's going to come from that still, those liabilities, potential liabilities. But in terms of, you know, what we saw, we thought we would take a bigger hit on property taxes for this fiscal year, but we actually got some help from the state, a one-time funding, a little north of $20 million from the state to help with those hits to our property tax. But it wasn't as, you know, I would say on the property tax revenue side as hard as we thought it would be.
You know, a lot of this is, we've been seeing year over year, as you've mentioned, sort of the revenues declining or not reaching expectations, but the spending increasing. We call it a structural deficit.
Correct.
And you've outlined some proposals to address this. Which are the ones that you think are the most attainable that people should understand?
Sure, and you know, that's a good point. Like, even if revenues is on budget, it's this spending that's out of control. And my office has been sounding the alarm since day one, talking about overspending and the liability payouts. And unfortunately right now, the city is not doing much in terms of holding departments accountable who go over budget, right? Or the liabilities, the departments who commit the most liabilities. We don't see that accountability, even though we've recommended it, but I'm only one of 18 elected officials, right? It's gonna take more folks in City Hall, but I would say that's the hugest one, is the city council and the mayor need to actually sit down with these departments that tend to go over budget a lot, right size it, or figure out how to calm these spendings down, or stop the liabilities. And the liabilities are good because if you stop the liabilities, then people also don't get hurt, right? Because that's also another thing too. So I would say that's a big one. I'd also say if we can move towards a 2-year budget, that'd help as well, so we can better analyze how we did in the fiscal year. Because the way it is with a 1-year budget, once the budget passes in July, we start creating the next budget a few months later, and it's like we haven't even started seeing how we did.
Well, it's just so interesting because liabilities come on the back of potentially like cities police misconduct cases, but also slip and falls from streets that don't have lights, and this has become an issue in the mayoral election with Mayor Bassett and Councilmember Nithya Raman talking about it. I mean, you talked about a capital infrastructure program. I mean, there's not a lot of budgeting that happens for infrastructure, but the question is, where does the money come from?
Right, and if we actually did have a capital infrastructure plan, which is one of our recommendations, that would help tackle all these lawsuits and liabilities around broken sidewalks, street lights falling on people's heads, things like that, right? Our city is the largest city that doesn't have a plan when it comes to how do we want our city to be in terms of our built environment, our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, trees, and it's just mind-blowing because the way we tackle infrastructure in the city is we have hundreds of projects and we're like, okay, let's tackle this one, let's tackle this one, let's tackle this one. And there's really no efficient, effective way to make the city much better, right? And so we do need that capital infrastructure.
Yeah, we do, and you also made a point of this $950 million spent on homeless services, or at least the issue of homelessness in Los Angeles. And now LA City Council and the Housing and Homelessness Committee in particular is considering what to do with some $300 million for homeless services that would have otherwise, and may still, go to LAHSA. You conducted an audit of LAHSA, as did Federal Judge David O'Carter and others, and it found that LAHSA wasn't tracking its funds properly. The county took its money. Now the city is thinking, do they give the money to the county? Do they do something else with it? Do they give it to LAHSA? I mean, what do you make of all of this? Because you've taken a look at some of this LAHSA spending.
Sure, and you know, as the financial watchdog over the city's funds, the biggest thing that we need around homelessness is stronger and more proactive oversight and transparency. My office does some of that through our homelessness dashboard that we've created for the city. It shows homelessness spending in real time. It shows metrics, but it is very difficult to see how our investments in homelessness is actually doing, or what are we getting in return, because homelessness is outsourced right now, right? It's not in the city. And because of that, it's very hard to find the accounting. It's very hard to hold service providers accountable. We rely heavily on LAHSA. And so for anything what the city does, whether they pull $300 million or they put it somewhere else, all I care about and what Angelina should care about is we need to know where that money is going, and is there going to be proper oversight and safeguards over that? And that's what we're for.
Theoretically, one way to do that is for the city just to handle everything, but that's really difficult. That's why LAS was created. A judge said, look, we're going to create this thing to handle this stuff, but as you say, it's hard to see it. Your office conducts these audits, and it's one of the reasons why you were really concerned about a charter reform proposal that would have rearranged some things with financial oversight in the city. The city administrative officer would have become a chief financial officer, city financial officer, essentially, and you said that this reform would have taken some of your authority. Just talk about why that is and where we are with this charter reform.
Yeah, sure. So two things about the charter reform. Basically, the city wants to create a chief financial officer, CFO position. And I would credit it because of me. Once I got into office, our office has been sounding the alarm that we need a CFO. And then all of a sudden now we're creating a CFO.
Well, we need to know what we're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And number one, what the charter reform proposal was last Thursday was to create the CFO position under the mayor and city council. And it would have essentially done a lot of the duties that I do. It would have done audits, it would have done controls for fraud, waste, and abuse. It would have done things around payments, around accounting, around revenue forecasting, things that we were doing.
Right.
And the weird thing was it came out on Wednesday evening, and I only had less than 24 hours to organize to stop it. Because even though they didn't mention my name, it literally said create this position under the mayor and council that would do literally everything I do, right? And so luckily, over 2,000 people gave public comment in person, over Zoom, through emails, and stopped it, right? It was a mass organizing effort. And I would say second, what did end up happening is the status quo. They are going to create this CFO position, or the charter reform did recommend it, but it'll just stay the same. It's the CAO handling it, right?
Yeah.
And nothing changes how the city handles its finances. And that's why we were advocating for us to do it, because we have CPAs, we're financially qualified, and we accountable to the people, not to the mayor or city council.
Well, it's very interesting. Chief Administrative Officer is accountable to the mayor, correct? I mean,
Correct.
That is part.
Huge.
So that's part of the conversation. That's Matt Szabo. He's come on the show very often. He was fine with getting that audit power. He said he wasn't taking anything from your office, or the CFO wouldn't. It'll be interesting to see where it all goes, because remember, all of this could potentially wind up on the November ballot. But as you say, you had some success in advocating for the way you wanted to see it come down. It's great to have these conversations with you, because we need to know what's happening with these audits. Thanks for coming in and answering these questions.
Of course, you're welcome.
City Controller Kenneth Mejia. Obviously, well, a lot to talk about when we are seeing Los Angeles and the finances and what might be ahead for voters in November as well. Stay with us. Much more coming up. We'll be right back.